Um,
Man, you make it really hard to go to the bathroom, Scott. I mean, I want to sit here and
I
watch
know.
this.
I'll
Gosh.
send you the link, buddy. So, okay, take care. So, good job with the questions, and we have for the third hour. Um, we'll start with Dan and Ruth. So, what I want to do, just kind of to kind of kill time. This is a fabulous video. Dan Siegel is one of the top neuroscientists, and he's going to explain neurologically, kind of from a little bit of a different angle, this mismatching experiences, but he's just going to frame it differently, as well as talk about just why we go from the bottom up, right to left. So I just thought it would kill some time and I think a great learning experience for you. So here we go.
If a child is conceived and goes through gestation, is born, and has certain patterns of interaction with their caregivers, there's a way of understanding how the synaptic architecture in their brain, in the skull, and how it's connected to the two hemispheres across the corpus callosum, and also connected down into the body. So just to look at those two forms of integration, left and right, and up and down, you can actually sense how attachment experiences in the past, so going across this fourth dimension, have then molded the way not only the synaptic connections get formed, but how the child now with those synaptic tendencies will begin to, in a way, stimulate the environment to give them feedback which is in accordance with what they are familiar with. You create your own nightmare. In other words, you recreate your past. And it's simple to say, well, you're comfortable with your familiar, but from a synaptic point of view, it's actually happening automatically by the patterns that the nervous system has a tendency to evoke in childhood as an adaptation, become evoked as a way of being in the world as an adolescent, as an adult as well. So when you look at it that way, then you go, okay, well then what's the point of thinking about this? Because the person is just going to move forward in life constantly recreating things. Why is that something you should think about? The brain is embedded in all these synaptic connections. It's just going to keep on going, right? And you can say, well, not so fast. Because when we look at the connection between the brain and the mind and relationships, you actually see a window of opportunity for transformation. And it goes like this. If you think of a plane of reality, that exists, let's say right here. If this plane is full of possibility, open possibility, then you go, okay, anything is possible in this plane. But when you have synaptic changes that happen, above the plane you get certain proclivities, certain patterns. Let's say if I've been neglected as a child, I'll have a disconnection from myself, and that's embedded in synaptic connections. So that would be a kind of, if you will, peak and valley set that's up here in a certain pattern. The mind part of that, if that's the physical, spatial part of reality, the mind part is where your experience is, I feel disconnected. I don't know my body. I feel disconnected from other people. So these two are called primes. They aren't reducible to each other. They are as basic as you get. Synaptic connectivity here and the feeling of disconnection here. Now, both of them are away from the plane of open possibility. What we want to do in therapy is give people the opportunity to relax their subjective experience into openness, and at the same time, that will bring synaptic firing patterns into the openness too, a receptive, open, synaptic state. Now, when you think of it this way, then, from that openness becomes all sorts of possibilities. Instead of just being mired in a certain synaptic profile, which has a certain mental experience, you can drive either through pushing mental experience, energy and information flow, in a different direction toward this plane of open possibility. You also are going to push synaptic firing that way. So the mind, this energy and information flow regulation, can bring synaptic firing with it. It isn't just the opposite, where, you have these synapses and they're going to follow a certain pattern and your mind will just passively follow. Not at all. So when you really think this way, then you realize the mind can actually change the firing patterns of the brain. And the idea of this open possibility plane is that when you bring people there, you can show them new ways of being. A simple example would be a person who is raised in this avoidantly attached way can, with the proper either experiences through a book or through relationships or in psychotherapy, have the experience of returning to openness and, let's say, getting more connected to their body. So what before was intolerable when they were a child, now you invite them to experience it, and in the safety of a relationship where they feel felt, or the comfort of being at home just reading a book, they try it on their own and they notice their heart beating. They bring in the feeling in their gut. And they value those sensations in the here and now, whereas no one in their childhood did anything like that to acknowledge their internal state. They are coming to this open plane of possibility, and in that exchange with a book or with a therapist, they're experiencing an entirely new mental side of things, which brings along synaptic firings. Now, once you do that and they've realized it's possible, there's a charge to it because it's incredibly rewarding to feel an authentic experience, right? From this plane of open possibility comes authenticity, which has its own reward because ultimately it is a profoundly integrative state that brings flexibility and brings a sense of truth to it. So with this kind of presence and attunement that we're talking about between a therapist and a client, or a person with themselves doing meditation or even reading a book that really speaks to them, they can then come into this experience of attuning to themselves and begin to resonate. Now, the resonance is this quality where literally you're having entities join with each other, in case of two people, or what's in a book and what's with the person who's the reader, and they are going to be transformed because of the resonance. Truth emerges, a sense of trust emerges. All these things are going to change as things move forward. And now the person is not the same as they used to be. So even though before, let's say in this particular case, someone was distant from their own internal experience, constantly created distant relationships with others, said, oh, there's nothing to life but this, through this process of opening, in fairly rapid order, a person can move to a whole different way of being if they've had the opportunity to go through this plane of possibility.
So, all that to say is I'm glad you enjoyed that. Teresa found the YouTube, and so you, again, I just thought I found that as I was presenting to the faculty training the other day, and so thought that you would love to kind of see that on what we're all about and how that works neurologically. So, John, just about ready to come back on. As you have any questions in about that, just let me know, and I'll try to answer some of those. His concept of the mind is actually the social emotional experience. I don't like that he uses the word mind because we just think of it more intellectual. And then he uses the brain as a neurology, and then relationships are what really impact the mind, which impacts the brain the most. And again, he's probably one of the foremost neuroscientists that's leading that kind of research that now has shaped the field in the last 9 or 10 years. that we actually lead with emotions, and so that's why we have you go from bottom up, right to left. And you're right, Cheryl, it's tremendous hope. I was talking to a mother that was really distraught because of the way she related to her child that didn't build strength. And so we talked about ways she could, and she says, well, does it do any good? And so that's kind of the when I look at Romans 12:1, by the renewing of your mind, I'm looking at that. This is one aspect that he has created our mind so that new experiences, spiritually, it's new experiences in the family that give us some things that our family of origin has not done. And this is emotionally, that same principle takes place in our life as we build in for like the dependent personality, strength, separation. I can be different and not overwhelmed. So, yeah, the bottom up is we come from the amygdala into the neocortical, which is the thinking. And often other therapies will start, well, think this way or behave this way. And that's the neocortical, which is also on the left side of the brain. We create experiences because that's what is most powerful at embedding new synaptic pathways. They come through relational experiences are the most powerful. Well, John's out there someplace. Oh, yeah, the moving from the right to left is another way that they've kind of divided the brain up is the right is the more feeling oriented and creative, and the left is the more logical. And so it really depends. Most of the literature now is dividing it from the amygdala and in those things in the lower brain, the limbic system is the bottom to the neocortical, which is more the rational. And so as we get the limbic system kind of both calmer and kind of with these more accurate experiences, then as we talk about and put words and cognitive, it builds that structure even deeper. So we can't just stay in the limbic system. We have to bring the neocortical, and these are the new schemas and ways that they're behaving differently, and that really binds that structure in a more powerful way. So you're right, Brenda. The CBT tends to come from the top down, left to right. And so we just use CBT at a later, just a little bit of a later time once the relationship is established and these new experiences, then we move in. And so that's why that is still part of our kind of part of the Townsend model also. Yeah, if a person operates more from their left brain, it depends if it's creating symptoms and discomfort, and if it isn't, then you're fine. Same thing with a person that's creative. But if not, then sometimes those are more intellectual defenses to cover up some of the other aspects. So they can operate that way as long as they have access to the deeper feelings. And if that can get integrated, that's really key. And Siegel and other writers really focus on that. So, okay.
Welcome back, guys, and I hope Dan Siegel was good. Scott always gets great videos I want you to pay attention to. Okay, we've got a special treat now for your content piece, and this is, I want you to welcome Dr. Karen Bergstrom.
Hello.
Karen, nice to be here with you.
Yep.
Karen is, she has her PhD from CGI, California Graduate Institute, and has spent her career, a large part, she's done a lot of stuff, working with basically a lot of the social world that you wouldn't expect having to do with children. Two organizations, one of which she was an executive of, and another in which she helped to direct and found. The first one is Olive Crest, and here in Southern California, Olive Crest is a place where foster care is done at a very high level, and she always made sure that the clinical training and the social work training was done right. The second one is called Safe Families, and that's more of a ministry passion for Karen. She's going to tell you about that too. And Safe Families model is, there are times when a child is with parents who are temporarily incompetent, maybe drugs or whatever, and there needs to be a place to put that child in a home that's loving with good structure for several weeks while mom and dad go through rehab, get clean and sober, get better life skills, and come back. And so she has a network of thousands of churches around the world now where where families can take in kids for that temporary amount of time, and it's wonderful work. And Karen and I have known each other longer than anybody in this classroom.
That's how old we are. That's how long.
We've been friends for over 30 years. We met when we were 7 years old.
Yeah, 7 years old.
And so there's just been a wonderful relationship. So we've known each other since we were both in grad school and went to training seminars and analytic brown bag lunches and conference to learn all this stuff. And we've kind of stayed in touch the whole time. Now, currently, it's the longest bio I've ever given anybody. You must feel good.
Because I'm older.
No, because you've accomplished a lot.
Okay.
Also, Karen works with the Townsend Leadership Group, which is the kind of the sister organization. The institute just puts out the academic part. Townsend Leadership Group is the professional part, where we have TLP teams and directors. And many of the people who are your process group facilitators are Townsend Leadership Group program people, but also we put out consultants and we put out coaches and this sort of thing. Karen is involved in the leadership of running all that, so we spend a lot of time together. So,
Yep.
it's been a
Want
good
to hear
ride so
about
far.
it? Yeah, it's been
Now she's
great.
got a lot of stuff to tell you, especially how you can practice and use the skills you're learning about the growth model in the big world. She's going to help you with a way to look at that.
Yeah. So I thought that would be interesting tonight, is to think about how do you take all this great learnings that you're involved in, this rich learnings, and apply it to your work as you go into the world. And so it is interesting that here I sit working in two different venues with business leaders and coaches, therapists, and working with families, organizations and people that can afford to hire us to take them to the next level. And at the same time, the other part of my life right now is working with the most marginalized families that I can think of in America, which are families at risk for losing their children and for family disintegration. And I kept thinking, why am I in these two different places? And that's kind of what I wanted to share with you all today, is that this great growth theory that you're getting can be applied to wealthy CEO, great organization that's doing phenomenal, and to a little struggling family that actually may be living literally in their car on their street with their two kids, trying to figure out how they're going to make it. And,
so you take the lens of the growth model our students are learning: attachment, separateness, integration, adulthood, and you through that lens you can work with a Fortune 500 company or somebody living in their car.
Right.
Great.
And this movement, Safe Families, which we're highlighting a little tonight, I wanted to tell you how it was this very model that really was really behind the pieces of the architecture to this model. And so I want to kind of share that with you. So there is a an idea. There was this idea that what if families in the community took in other people's children for a little while and for free and watched the children while their parents, usually it is a mom, single mom, get back on their feet. And what if the only thing we offered them was relationship? What if actually this bonding and boundaries and integration reality were practiced relationally, and that was enough for families to move out of crisis to a place where they then can get back to where they are.
So much more than, well, we got to make sure they've got food, shelter, those things. But you're saying, what if the real bottom line is healthy relationship?
Only. What if we built a movement around introducing a family that's a little bit ahead, has some resources, has relational capacity, with a family that at that moment is in deep crisis? And what if that was really all we were good at? That's all we really expected of ourselves, and trusted that process. So this movement was built on that. And I wanted you to get excited as you think about your work and taking this model and applying it to your good work as you go out after graduation. And I wanted just to share with you that even 30 years ago, running group homes and foster care, I would invite John to come and we would dig into how do staff lead well when they're raising kids in a group home, or foster parents who, this was way before we had any of the attachment, trauma-focused training or any of that. We just used this model.
Yep.
It was the way that we taught people to raise kids, or it was the way we taught staff to understand human behavior and understand each other. So I thought I would go over a couple things with you. Something delightful that's...
Before,
okay.
I want you to brag a bit, and I know you're a little bit narcissistic phobic.
Okay, I'll brag.
How big is Safe Families now?
So as a result of the simplicity of this model and the correctness of this model, it's we're in 32 states. We've hosted almost 40,000 kids in this movement, all volunteer-based, and 5 countries. 32 states, 5 countries, 40,000 children, and all of this in the last 15 years. We're 15 years old. And it really began, I remember calling John again, like I do every time I'm building something new. Will this work? I was terrified. Is relationship really enough? Is it really true that if a mom connects with another mom and breathes some life into her and lets her know that she's for her and that she can do this, and hosts her children meanwhile, which is, delightful. But we say in this movement, the orphan is the mom, not the children. The children have a mom.
Yes.
So it's a very different attitude of, I am for you to be their mom. I believe you can do this. And for the first time during this relationship time, this mom that's struggling has a little more oxygen to be able to say, you really think I can do this? And it goes through the process to get back on our feet.
Gosh, it just makes me think so much about the neurology, Karen, of we keep thinking, well, they need skills. But if you're not connected deeply and safely, the skills training is like la, la, la.
Right.
They don't metabolize it. The relationship's got to be driving all that.
And so what happened about 10 years ago, brand new research came out that I wanted to share with you. So we're talking about the growth model. And John and I will talk about it a little more, but I wanted to introduce to you a social model that's deeply embedded in research. Center for Social Policy put it out, came out about a decade ago, but it was right in the middle of the launching of Safe Families and this idea, can volunteers really do this? Can communities really love people in trouble before they go off the cliff and do child abuse and family disintegration? And so it's called the protective factors. So research says that if 5 factors are in place, and I'm going to go over them with you, are in place, the likelihood of abuse highly, highly diminishes.
So statistically, they've shown this.
They've shown this research-based and beautiful. So in the middle of all these good ideas, we actually have some research and some evidence to say this actually works. So it's exciting for me. So I want to share it with you. And I thought, as I share the research on protective factors for families, if families have this type of a protective factor functioning in their home, then the likelihood of their children being harmed in such a way, hurt, possibly. Poverty, yes. Lots of the things that will continue in their life, but not harm, to the point of family disintegration and child abuse. So the first one that I want to talk about, and I thought it would be fun to show you how each of these components that have nothing to do with our growth model, and these are not research or based on any of kind of the theories.
They're kind of atheoretical.
Atheoretical or cog-B, you know, more of a idea, do these 4 things and life will work. But I wanted to show you how they're integrated and challenge you, even as you are thinking about your good work in the future, of how to take the growth model and think about how does it work really in human behavior and work. So the first one, and John, I think I'm not even going to go in order, and you have to kind of figure out where this fits in the growth model.
I'm used to this. I've known her a long time. I was expecting it not to go in order.
I'm not going to do it in order, so we'll see if he gets it right. So parental resilience is one of the 5 factors that if the family has that built into their system, the likelihood of abuse diminishes. So I'll define resilience in my way. It'll be my language, okay, John?
Always.
Okay. So resilience, what do my notes here say? The human capacity to face and overcome, maybe transform an adversity. But the ability to do that, if a family has the ability to ask or receive, develop this human capacity, bounce back, handle things that are really hard, and face them, then they have a better chance of making it through this really big crisis in their life. Where would you put that on our structure? 3, ding, 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 he got it right. So we call that, so talk a little about that, reality and...
It has to do with the integration of negative and positive reality, or just integration, where God meant us, living in a fallen world now, to deal with failure, loss, hurt, rejection, hard times. And when we, learn to not expect the world to be perfect, and so we can not judge the world or ourselves, just say that's the way that we call that normalizing. That increases the ability to deal with it. And secondly, it helps us build support so that people can enter our life and say, I'm with you in this, and we can persevere.
Yeah. So our language, we don't talk about resilience in that way. There's great research out. But in the social science world, resilience is really a great factor in human potential. And so they looked at families that made it out of their crisis, and resilience was one of the greatest factors. How do we build that in families and so forth? And, you know, what I only knew really was the growth model, so I thought it in terms of reality, integration. And some of these brave families living on the streets, struggling in drugs, addictions, family of origin issues like you've never seen before with children, have the ability to integrate, and sometimes better than some of us do. They have a strength of character to be able to look at reality and go, I'm going to do this. I mean, to the fact that they hand over a child to a stranger, and it's usually a church person who are even stranger, and say, I'm going to let you do this for me. And there's a resilience to them where the reality is so true that they know they need to do this. So that's resilience.
Here's a negative reality. We've got 10 minutes left.
Okay.
You got 4 to go.
The next one is this concrete support in times of care. This one's a little bit challenging, but basically we used to think as long as we give them food and shelter and so forth that they will make it. And so we've spent a lot of money and time in the social sector providing stuff for people. And it is one of the protective factors. If a family is homeless, giving the children a place to live will provide a lot more safety. And so when we talk about the reality of, not the word reality, but about concrete, when they encounter a crisis like domestic violence and realize their life is going off the cliff, where in the character structure would you kind of identify this factor needs to be developed?
So the concrete part would be, how do you prevent bad things to keep occurring for you? What are some practical skills and tools?
Yeah, how do you stop? 2, ding, 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 ding. You're doing good, John. You're doing real good.
Separateness and boundaries, and getting clear boundaries, and empowering the mom especially to say, I want this and this doesn't work for me, right?
Yeah, no more.
No more.
No more. I'm not going to live the way my mom lived. I'm not going to raise my kids the way my family did.
Yeah.
I'm coming off the streets. I'm bringing the kids in, or I'm going into rehab and trusting someone to help me out. This one's a little more obvious, so I know you're going to get it right. But one of the ones that really comforted me in this movement is that one of the social factors is the language is used, social connections. That if a family is connected to a person that cares for them, the likelihood of them harming their children. So so much of what we want to do is treatment plans and setting up all kinds of systems of care, but this one is just plain old simple relationship. If a person has a relationship with somebody good in their life that they know is for them, harm does not happen to children.
Need-based attachment, number one.
Need-based attachment. I think I've been more astounded by this than anything.
What is that?
So we have host families that host the children that live in great homes and have wives and husbands, two-income families or one-income families are pretty secure. And I have found that sometimes the marginalized or homeless mom or drug-addicted mom actually has more ability to be aware of what they need more than the host mom that's hosting the children. Because they're not hosting out of a need. They're hosting out of altruism or they probably are hosting out of a need. But so I've really been surprised
like
about
it's sort
that.
of naked need for them. That's all they have.
Yes.
Jesus talked about the poor will I have with you. They can't disguise it. They're just there with a need, and so it probably helps with the attachment needs.
And so much of the teaching that goes on is between the mom that's struggling with the mom that thinks she has her needs met and really finds out the conflict. So all this beautiful learning is happening between these two. So social connections, and I just want to again reiterate, it was a risk to go forth based on the growth model and say, can volunteers just do this for each other? And not have all the extra services and no treatment, there's no counseling, it's just this relational compassion. And when this research came out, I thought, wow, nothing that I've shared with you so far of these 3 protective factors require a PhD. I hate to break it to you, it doesn't even require a master's degree from Townsend Institute. That these are factors that can be offered human to human. That these are things that can happen organically between healthy people. So that's what was exciting to me, is that protective factors aren't clinical. They're common sense. And then last 2 really talk about education. They're more based on knowledge of parenting and knowledge of social emotional competence. And so I think it's really takes a maturity to understand.
She's throwing me the ball.
No, I'm saying...
She's tossing me. I'm not supposed to tip it in this is really hard. She's telling me everything to say.
Okay, what's the last one, John?
Well, I think that since this has to do with training and helping people to learn developmental skills on a competence level, that sounds very much to me like the 4th stage called adulthood, where we learn to have a work ethic, to develop skills we need to make the world a better place.
Yep. And this is where we start with people. That's part of our problem, is that we as practitioners are really smart and we have a lot of ideas, and this is where we start. We believe people need to be trained. They need to understand how to raise their children, in this case, take care of their children, or be in therapy, or all of the things that we're so smart. And so I've had fun saying I've been able to put my PhD on the shelf, and when the protective factors really are just human factors. That if humans are surrounded by people that care about them in a healthy way, they then will have the capacity or grow to have the capacity to learn. A quick story is we had one of these a child in our home, little Lissa, and her mom would scream at her child every time she told her anything.
So you had a lot of observational time watching. Was that in your home, watching Mom and Alyssa in the home? So that's where you started figuring out the dynamic.
Yes, I did. I actually practiced it, but what I saw was that I couldn't teach her anything until I had a relationship with her. And one of the stories is she got dressed up for church, to go to church with us. The mom was going to go. Her child was in our home. Why don't you go? She wanted to go to church. And she was dressed up in her street clothes. She really was struggling out there in the streets. And I'm talking heels this high and a tight dress. And she was decked out for church.
She was a prostitute?
There was some prostitution, yeah. But more of it was just her street clothes, just her party. And she was dressing up to join us. And my kids came in and said, Mom, she's wearing this. You should probably go tell her. I go, you go tell her. This is a family ministry, you know. And what I wanted to share with you is that because of my relationship with her, I was able to tell her, my church I go to will judge you. If you walk in those clothes down that middle aisle in the way that I know you walk, they're not going to get to know the mom that loves her little girl, the mom that's working so hard to get back on her feet. And so I had a wonderful experience of thinking I didn't have a right to speak to her. But when I said, I want them to like you, I want them to know you, and they won't. And so I taught her a life lesson that I had permission to. And so anyways, I'm not making you choose what was happening on the tree there. I think it was an integrated experience. Yeah. That if we don't have those kinds of depths of relationships, we can't speak that way to people.
How did she respond to that wonderful thing?
She went back in my girls' closet. They were both in high school, my daughters, and dug around. They found an outfit for her and dressed. She still strutted when she walked down the middle aisle at church. She still turned it on, you know. But my point is, I wanted her to win, and she was able to hear that instead of that big judge. So my encouragement is to take the model that you're learning, and I've applied it to a ministry, and I've applied it to a clinical program at a big agency, 700 employees. But how is this true when it comes to working with people? And how can you take these concepts? You can sit here with John someday and run the test through him and ask him, where does that fit, John, on the character model?
I can tell you what's going to happen in 1 minute.
What?
I know these students. They're really bright, they're very curious, and they're thinkers. Right now, they're going to bombard you with, well, what I want to do is an equestrian thing. How's that fit? What I want to do is an adolescent
That's
treatment.
what I want you to do.
And what a place for you guys to feel the vision that God's put in you and say, whatever it is, the growth model is universal, so how do we look at it through a lens and have people not coping, but transform for the entire rest of their life? That's what Karen's teaching you.
Yep.
So that's our stuff. Thank you very much.
You're
I had no
welcome very
idea
much.
where you were going to go with this, and I'm so moved by especially the story
Karen's story.
of the mom.
Yeah.
It's wonderful. It's just such a picture of redemption. We all need it. All right, guys, we're going to go to the other place where we get to play on the monitors and answer questions. So, Scott, tee it up. We'll be right there.
Sounds good.
Okay, here we go. So Sally, go ahead and get on. You should be able to see your video. Let's see, not yet. Just a second, I'll get you. I had you. Okay, that should do it. You should see it now. There you go. You're there. Okay, so we need some other questions. Otherwise, John's going to yell at you, so I'd hurry up. Sally, you're out of the doghouse, so you're okay. Okay, okay, great. So, Brenda, you can go ahead and get on. I just enabled you. Then in the, then we'll do Ruth. So you'll be on deck. As soon as Sally's done, you can jump on and I'll tell you. Ruth, there we go. And Chuck, I think a second. Okay, we'll get you on too, Chuck.